They say 100 riders don't cross the valley without a reason. Not in this land. Not in this life. So when the ground started to tremble like thunder trapped in bone, when the crows took flight without warning, and the dust rose behind a silent wall of riders, no one in the valley knew what to make of it. But Elijah Briggs did, because he was the reason they came, and all he'd done was hand over a half-loaf of bread. But let's go back to the start of it, to a man, a cabin, and a choice so small it barely seemed like anything at all. The land stretched quiet, gold as firelight and dry as bone. Summer hadn't ended, but already the ground cracked with thirst. Buzzards circled higher than usual, and the creek that once sang along the north edge of Elijah's land now whispered itself dry. Even the cacti drooped. The cabin sat alone at the top of a bluff, not fancy, not forgotten, just still. A place built not for visitors but for silence. Elijah Briggs had lived there 12 years. Didn't say much. Didn't smile much either. Folks in town said he'd lost a wife to fever and a son to war, but no one ever asked for details. The West had a way of letting grief grow wild, like vines no one dared cut back. Most days, Elijah split wood before sunrise, patched fencing before noon, and tried not to think too hard before sundown. He had 3 chickens left, a dog too old to bark, and enough flour for maybe 2 more loaves. The last time he saw town was 4 months ago. The last time he prayed was longer. So when he heard something, rustling, near the chicken coop that morning, he figured it was a coyote or maybe a kid looking for eggs. He came around the side with his old Winchester slung low, not raised. He didn't need it yet, but it wasn't a thief. It wasn't even a man. It was a boy, maybe 14, maybe younger. His face was smudged with dust, hair in uneven braids, ribs showing beneath a torn shirt. His feet were bare, cut and swollen. And when he saw Elijah, he didn't run. He just froze. Elijah didn't speak right away. The boy's eyes were sharp but sunken. His mouth was cracked from thirst. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. "Where's your family?" Elijah asked, voice low and dry from disuse. The boy didn't answer, just stood there swaying. Elijah reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the last of the bread, still warm from that morning's fire. It was half a loaf, maybe a little more. He broke it in half again, held it out. The boy stared at it like it might disappear if he blinked. Then slowly he took it and sat down right there in the dust. Ate in silence, crumbs falling into his lap, not looking up until it was gone. Elijah crouched nearby, didn't ask questions, didn't press. After a while, the boy leaned against the coop and closed his eyes. He was asleep before the wind changed. Elijah watched him, then stood, went inside, filled a canteen, left it by the boy's hand. When he came back out, the boy was gone. Didn't take the canteen, didn't steal anything, just gone, like he'd never been there. But that night, as Elijah sat by the window with a pipe in one hand and a Bible he didn't open in the other, something stirred in him. Not fear, not regret, something older, like he'd just lit a match in the middle of a dry forest. He didn't sleep well. The next morning, hoofbeats came, far off at first, like thunder you think you imagined, then louder. The dog growled. Elijah stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, and what he saw made his throat go dry. 1 rider came first, then 10 more, then the rest, silent, steady, riding in a formation so tight and even it looked like a single body made of 100 men. All native, painted horses, war braids, feathers, spears, rifles, eyes that did not blink. They didn't shout, didn't wave weapons, just came and stopped. 100 riders, lined up at the edge of his field. The boy was among them. This time he wasn't alone. And Elijah just stood there, wondering what you say to 100 ghosts called down by one small kindness. He thought of the bread, the soft center, the broken crust, and how, somehow, it had been enough to change everything. The wind stopped. The land held its breath. And Elijah Briggs, the loneliest man in the valley, realized he was no longer alone. The 100 riders didn't move. They just stood like a living wall of leather, braids, and bone, their horses shifting quietly beneath them, breath misting in the morning chill. Their stillness wasn't threatening, not yet. But it wasn't casual either. Elijah lowered the rifle. He didn't sling it, didn't put it down, just lowered it, then stepped off the porch with slow, careful steps, boots crunching over the dry dirt path. He didn't say a word, and neither did they, until the boy rode forward. His horse was small, painted, scarred, and sure-footed. The boy sat tall now, cleaner, stronger, a necklace of carved bone around his neck. He looked older than he had days ago, though it hadn't been days. Only 2. He dismounted without a word, walked forward, and handed Elijah something wrapped in deerskin. Elijah took it, heart thudding. Inside was a loaf of bread, fresh, still warm. Behind him the dog whined. The boy pointed at the porch. "For your kindness." Elijah looked at the bread, then at the boy, then at the sea of riders behind him. "You came back for this?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "It's not just bread," he said. "It's how you gave it." Elijah didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being seen. He wasn't used to being remembered. Then, from the center of the riders, another man stepped forward. An elder, mounted on a massive red horse. Braids down to his waist, lines in his face like cracks in stone. He spoke in soft Apache, and the boy translated. "You gave food to my blood," he said, "when the white men in town let him starve." Elijah swallowed. Didn't know who he was. "Doesn't matter," the boy said, echoing the elder. "You gave from your last. That means something." A wind passed over the field, light but sharp. Elijah looked at the 100 riders, then at the boy. "Are you safe now?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Yes, because of you." Elijah opened his mouth, shut it again. Then, "You hungry still?" The boy smiled, slight and rare. "Always." Later, Elijah had 20 people sitting cross-legged in his field, breaking bread with him. They brought smoked deer meat, flat corn cakes, dried berries. They passed food with reverence, not as strangers, but as people who had decided to stop walking for one moment and share. Elijah sat in the middle, his rifle nowhere near him, no tension in his shoulders for the first time in years. And then a shadow rose from the ridge. One lone rider, fast, dusty. From town, Caleb Brunner, deputy, sharp-jawed, barely 25. He saw the crowd, the horses, the fire. He pulled his rifle before his boots hit the dirt. "Get back," he barked. "Step away from that rancher." Half a dozen of the Apache riders stood before Elijah could move. They didn't draw, but they didn't smile either. Elijah stood up slowly, raising a hand. "Put the gun down, Caleb. They got you surrounded," Caleb said, voice high with fear. "You all right?" I said put it down. Caleb hesitated, looked at Elijah, really looked, and saw something he hadn't expected. Not fear, not hostage panic, just peace. Reluctantly, Caleb lowered the gun. "Town's talking," he muttered. "Said you were harboring him, feeding him. Said you'd gone mad." Elijah crossed his arms. "I gave a boy some bread. He gave me peace in return." Caleb shifted his weight. "That ain't how it works, Elijah. They burned wagons last month out near Dry Creek. Sheriff says we can't trust any of them. Sheriff don't know what the hell he's talking about." A quiet fell over the field. The boy stepped forward again. "You fed me when your town turned away. The others remember that." Elijah looked at Caleb. "You think kindness is weakness, don't you?" Caleb didn't answer. "You think a man who gives from his last is foolish. But they came not for revenge, not for raiding. They came to honor a choice." The elder nodded. Then the boy added, "You fed the hungry. That makes you a chief." Caleb blinked. "He ain't no chief. He is," the boy said, "because he listened. When the riders left that night, they didn't leave like ghosts. They left gifts. A knife carved from obsidian, a blanket woven by firelight, seeds wrapped in cloth, corn, tobacco, and a rare blue flower that only bloomed in July." The boy pressed a pouch into Elijah's hand. Inside it was a carved emblem, Apache script surrounded by a circle of twine. "You are marked now," he said. "Marked how?" "As someone who gave without fear." Elijah said nothing, but his hands trembled slightly. As the riders vanished into the dusk, Caleb stood on the edge of the road, rifle still slung, looking lost. He looked at Elijah. "You could have started a war." Elijah turned, slow. "No," he said. "I ended one that never should have begun." That night, Elijah Briggs sat on the porch, bread in his lap, dogs at his feet, the stars opening overhead like a door into something better. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. 2 days later, the trouble began. Came slow like smoke before the fire. Not violent, not loud. Just whispers. Then knocks on doors. Then questions no one wanted to answer. The first knock came just after sunrise. Elijah was fixing a busted hinge on the barn door when he heard it. 3 raps, sharp and measured. He didn't hurry, just wiped his hands on a rag and stepped around the corner. Sheriff Almer was waiting, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. 2 deputies flanked him, stiff-backed boys with guns they held too tight. "Elijah," the sheriff said, "mind if we come in? Mind if I ask why?" Almer tipped his hat back, sighing. "You've been on your own a long time, Briggs. Never been trouble. Never caused none." Elijah folded his arms. And now folks in town say you hosted a war council on your land, gave food to raiders, helped scout routes along the creek trail." Elijah said nothing, didn't flinch. Almer stepped closer. "It does matter, because the army's moving in. Patrols from Fort McCabe. They heard the rumors. And if you're known to be friendly," Elijah cut him off. "You think feeding a starving kid is a war crime now?" "I think it's a line some men don't like being crossed," Almer said. "And out here, lines get people killed." The deputies looked uneasy. Almer went on. "Look, I don't care who you feed, but the colonel at the fort, he cares. And if those riders come back, he won't wait to ask why." Elijah stepped back. "Then maybe the colonel's the one you ought to warn." Almer studied him for a moment. "You were always a stubborn son of a bitch," he muttered. Then he turned and left. The dust from their horses lingered longer than their words. That night, Elijah lit a lantern and sat by the window. Didn't eat. Didn't speak. The old dog whined once, sensing something wasn't right. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, there were boot prints by the creek. Fresh. Too heavy for scouts. Too careless for hunters. Elijah tracked them for a while, rifle slung but not raised. They led west, toward the old trail the Apache had taken when they left. Somebody had followed them. Somebody with orders and a badge. He returned home just before noon to find a sheet nailed to his door. A warning. "Known sympathizer. Federal attention advised." Elijah tore it down. Burned it in the stove. But the heat in his chest didn't leave. It wasn't about the boy anymore. It was about control. About who got to show mercy and who got punished for it. About who got to define danger. The following week, strangers started showing up. White men on government horses, wearing blue, with papers and questions. How many came through? Were they armed? Did they speak of raids? Each question more loaded than the last. Elijah gave them nothing. They left angry, but not empty-handed. One snapped a picture of the carved Apache token still hanging in Elijah's window. "Evidence," he muttered. That night, Elijah took it down. But he didn't burn it. He wrapped it in cloth, placed it in the chest beneath his bed, alongside his wife's scarf, and his son's letters. Things worth keeping. On the 4th night, a fire broke out on the East Ridge. Not wildfire, a cabin. Thomas Holler's place. Half burned before water got to it. He'd been seen talking to Elijah the week before. Said kindness wasn't a crime. Now he had nothing but smoke and soot to show for it. The town sheriff shrugged it off as lightning. But there'd been no storm. Elijah knew what it was. A warning. One they hadn't dared bring to his door. Not yet. The next morning, Elijah packed a saddlebag, filled it with what food he had, a folded map, and the carved token. Then he walked the same trail the boy had taken days before, followed it all the way to the canyon bluff, waited there, beside a cairn of stones and a worn tree stump shaped like a crooked hand. He waited till dusk, when the riders returned. Not 100 this time, only 5, but they came fast, sure-footed, without surprise. The boy was among them, still wearing the necklace, his eyes darker now, not with anger, with understanding. Elijah raised his hand. "I didn't call you here to beg," he said. "I came to warn you." He told them of the patrols, of the photographs, of the fire. The boy listened, then nodded. "We knew it would happen." "You coming back?" Elijah asked. "Not now," the boy said, "but one day, not to fight, to bury, to remember." Then he handed Elijah something wrapped in hide. Another token, this one marked with a different symbol. Not kindness, not peace, loyalty. The boy's eyes narrowed. "You may lose this land, old man, but you'll never lose what it remembers." Elijah nodded and turned back toward home, knowing war might never knock on his door again. But its shadow was already sitting on the porch. Elijah Briggs didn't know what peace was until he lost the option of it. Back at the ranch, the quiet had changed. It used to soothe him. Now it unsettled. It wasn't silence anymore, it was waiting. Waiting for someone to come knock. Waiting for someone to burn what hadn't yet been taken. Each morning, he walked the perimeter with the rifle slung over his shoulder. Not to defend, but to make the point that he could. Still, he didn't sleep well. The fire from Thomas Holler's cabin had done something to him. Not just fear, shame. That his kindness had rippled outward and hurt a man who had only agreed with him. He thought about the boy, about the bread. He never even got the boy's name. 2 weeks passed before the next rider came. Just one. A girl this time, barely 20, hair tied back, wrapped in a dark shawl. She came riding under the early dusk sky, no weapons drawn, no flag held high. But something about her posture said she wasn't here for comfort. She stopped a good 20 yards from the porch, didn't dismount, didn't blink. Elijah stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth. He didn't reach for a weapon, just looked her over and waited. "You Elijah Briggs?" she asked, her voice low and clear. "I am." She reached into her satchel and pulled something out. A loaf of bread, wrapped in muslin. "I made this." He took it, surprised at how warm it still was. "For what?" he asked. "For saving my brother." Elijah's breath caught. "The boy." She nodded. "You fed him when we couldn't. He told us. He told everyone." He glanced at the bread, then back at her. "He well. Better than he's been since our father died." Elijah looked down. "I didn't do much. You did enough." She dismounted finally, slow and deliberate, walked forward and sat on the edge of the porch without waiting for an invitation. Elijah hesitated, then joined her. They sat in silence for a while, the wind gently brushing the dry fields. "You have a name?" he asked. "Say." He nodded. "Beautiful name." She looked at him. "Means shadow." "Elijah means Yahweh is my God. But I stopped praying years ago." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "You still act like a man who believes in something." Elijah looked out at the land. Maybe he did. Maybe kindness was a kind of belief. Not in God. Not in reward. Just in each other. That night, Say slept in the barn. By her own choice. In the morning, she helped feed the hens, draw water, and dig out a fence post that had rotted at its base. She wasn't talkative, but she moved with confidence, like someone who didn't need to say much to be understood. By midday, she asked to see the creek. He took her there where the water barely trickled now. She knelt, cupped some in her hands. This was where he washed the blood from his feet. Elijah turned. "Blood. The men in town didn't just chase him off," she said softly. "They beat him, called him names, broke his ribs." Elijah swallowed hard. "I never knew. No one cared to tell you." He crouched beside her. "I did what anyone should have done." "No," she said gently. "You did what few would." The air was warm. Still, the trees above bent in the breeze. She took something from her pocket. Not a weapon. A sketch. Drawn by hand. Charcoal and paper. A man standing on a porch, loaf of bread in hand, dog at his feet, sky stretching out behind him. It was Elijah, rough and honest, weathered, alone. He drew this after he returned home, she said. It hangs in our gathering tent now. Elijah looked at it a long time. Why? Because he says it was the moment his life began again. He folded the sketch, hands shaking slightly. Is he safe now? Say nodded. Safe. Teaching other children to speak in both languages. Hunting when needed. He wants to be a healer one day. Elijah smiled. He'll be a good one. He already is. That evening, they shared the bread she brought, warm, salted, baked with herbs he didn't recognize. She said it was cedar smoke and bare root. He said it tasted like home. She smiled. And in that flickering lantern light, they talked. Not about politics or fear or towns filled with suspicion, but about her brother's laugh, and Elijah's wife's singing voice, and the way the land had a memory all its own. Before she left, she reached into her satchel again, pulled out a final gift, a necklace, simple twine. At the center, a carved bead of black stone, worn smooth by time. This belonged to my mother, she said. She was taken in by white missionaries, raised between two names. She always believed the heart should be the only home. Elijah looked at the necklace like it was a burning coal. I can't accept that. You already have, Say said. My brother gave it to me the day after you fed him. He told me, find the man who sees the hungry and does not flinch. She slipped it gently over his neck. It rested against his chest like a second heartbeat. Keep it, she whispered, for when the world tries to make you forget. And with that she turned, mounted, rode away. Elijah stood for a long time after, the necklace still warm, the sky still wide, and his soul, for the first time in a long while, still steady. The following winter came early. Snow dusted the bluff by October. The chickens huddled tighter. The dog no longer barked at passing hawks, just wagged his tail gently from the porch. Elijah's hands, once thick with strength, had grown slower, more deliberate, but he still moved with purpose, still rose with the sun, still lit the fire with cedar kindling every morning before his coffee boiled. He didn't go into town much anymore, didn't need to. Word had spread, quietly, like roots under the earth, that the man on the bluff wasn't a traitor. He was something rarer, a man who had seen the line between fear and decency and chosen not to pretend it wasn't there. No patrols came anymore, no more threats nailed to the door, and no one spoke of the boy in anger anymore. In fact, no one called him a boy at all. They spoke of him by name now, Tosin. It meant firelight in his tribe. Spring came, and with it a letter. No envelope, just folded, tied with red twine. Inside, a simple message, written in two languages, Apache and English. We are returning to plant something. Elijah didn't prepare a speech, didn't make a fire or decorate the cabin. He just cleared a wide patch near the south slope, where the light fell longest, and left a shovel resting by the fence post. They came on foot this time, dozens of them, women, children, elders, and young men with eyes full of both history and hope. Tosin was among them. He looked older now, broader in the shoulders, softer in the gaze. He walked with Say at his side, the two speaking low as they approached. When they reached Elijah, no one offered long greetings, just nods, a silence that meant more than words. Then they got to work. For 3 days they dug. They turned the hard ground, planted corn, beans, squash, the three sisters, Say called them. They told stories around the fire. They left stones in the shape of circles on the bluff, and they built a bench at the edge of the field, where the wind touched everything and nothing was ever in shadow. Elijah sat on that bench the last night, Tosin beside him. They didn't speak at first, just listened to the coyotes singing somewhere beyond the ridge. Then the boy, now a man, said, You remember the first thing you said to me? Elijah shook his head slowly. You asked where my family was. And you didn't answer. I didn't know, Tosin said. But now I do. He turned to Elijah. I steady. Voice quiet. My family is wherever someone chooses kindness over fear. Elijah blinked. Once. Then looked out at the rows of fresh earth stretching along the ridge. Good place to grow things, he said. Tosin nodded. That's what you did. You fed me, but more than that, you made space. A pause. I don't know how to repay that. You already have, Elijah said. The fire cracked behind them. Someone was singing soft, slow, the kind of melody that seemed older than the sky. Tosin placed something in Elijah's lap. Another stone, carved again, a third symbol. It meant keeper. Your field, Tosin said, is part of our circle now. And your name is in our wind. Years passed. Seasons came and went like tide and breath. The fields changed. The bench weathered. The porch sagged. But the stories didn't fade. And neither did the kindness. Children from town started visiting Elijah's ranch. Not out of fear, out of curiosity. Their parents told them to be polite, to listen, because that place held something. Not just history, but memory, living memory. Elijah grew older, but not bitter. He moved slower, but never stopped moving. And when the last winter came for him, gentle and soft like snow settling on warm ground, he passed quietly in his sleep, beneath the woven blanket Say had left him. In his hand, they found a folded paper, a sketch of a boy sitting in the dirt, breaking bread. It was Tosin, and above it, in Elijah's careful hand, a single line was written. A piece of bread can feed more than hunger. It can change a world. They buried him on the south ridge, by the bench, under the tree planted that first spring. Tosin and Say led the service. No preacher, just stories, a circle of stones, and a silence so full it sounded like prayer. They marked the grave with the same necklace Elijah had once worn. The bead now faded, but still whole, still warm, still true. And long after the mourners had left, Say remained behind, sitting on the bench, watching the field sway in the wind. A girl from town came to her side. Maybe 8, maybe 9. Was he your father? The girl asked. Say smiled, small and distant. No, she said softly, but he taught us all how to be family. The girl nodded, then looked at the wind, and listened.